Researchers have checked this in relationships, in feedback, in everyday memory, in practically every corner of psychology they've pointed it at, and they keep landing on the same lopsided result. A bad moment outweighs a good one of the same size, almost no exceptions, not close to 50-50. Bad wins nearly every time. You already have a memory like this. You know exactly which one. Maybe it's a sentence someone said in a kitchen 4 years ago. Maybe it's the way your voice cracked in a meeting nobody else remembers. Maybe it's 11:50 on a random Tuesday night, and it shows up anyway, uninvited, sharper than most of what actually happened that week. Here's what's strange about it. That memory almost certainly isn't the most important thing that happened to you that year. Not close. You've had bigger wins since, better nights, actual turning points. Most of those have gone quiet, filed away, hard to even summon on command. This one hasn't gone quiet. This one has a working alarm clock, and it goes off whether you touch the snooze button or not. So the honest question isn't, why did this happen to you? It's, why does this one still have volume, when so much good from that same stretch of your life has already gone silent? Marcus Aurelius wrote himself a note about this exact problem almost 2,000 years before anyone thought to write it into a psychology journal. He wasn't writing it for an audience. He was talking himself down from something, in private, mid-campaign, with no one watching. And it turns out he'd landed on something neuroscience wouldn't get around to proving for another 18 centuries. But first, the mechanism. Because the volume on that memory of yours isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, which, once you understand it, is almost worse. That memory isn't sitting in storage, untouched, waiting patiently for you to check on it. You're not opening a filing cabinet. You're opening something closer to a document that quietly resaves itself every single time, the moment you look at it. There's an experiment from 2000 that found this out by accident, more or less. Researchers had trained an animal to fear a specific sound. Once that fear memory was locked in, they reactivated it, just triggered the memory, nothing more, and then blocked protein synthesis in the part of the brain storing it. The fear vanished. Gone on later tests, like it had never been trained in the first place. But here's the detail that matters. Block that same protein synthesis 6 hours after the memory was reactivated, once it had already resettled, and nothing happens. The memory holds. The window where it can be rewritten isn't open all the time. It opens specifically when you recall it. Which means every time you replay that scene from the kitchen, you're not reviewing old footage. You're pulling the tape out, briefly, into a state where it can be re-recorded, and then it gets refiled, right then, with whatever mood you happen to bring to the replay. Tired and resentful on a Tuesday, sharper and angrier on a bad week. The memory doesn't sit still long enough to fade, because you keep handing it new material to fade from. I used to think replaying an old fight meant I hadn't gotten over it yet. Turns out the replaying was the thing keeping it ungotten over. I wasn't checking on a wound. I was reopening one, on a schedule I didn't know I'd set. None of this is a character flaw, by the way. It's not that you're dramatic or stuck or bad at moving on. It's that your brain is running the correct evolved procedure for an old memory that happens to still get retrieved. The procedure doesn't know the difference between updating something useful and re-traumatizing yourself for the 11th time this year. It just runs. Which raises an uncomfortable follow-up. If it's being rewritten every time you touch it, how much of what you're replaying is even accurate anymore? There's a quiet assumption sitting underneath all of this, one you've probably never said out loud because it's never occurred to you to question it. If a memory still feels this vivid, it must still be accurate. That assumption does not survive contact with the actual research. In 2003, researchers tracked a group of students starting the day after September 11th. Each student wrote down their memory of hearing about the attacks and also an ordinary memory from that same week, nothing dramatic, just an average Tuesday. Then they came back weeks or months later and tested both memories again. The accuracy of both memories declined, at the same rate. The emotional memory of the attacks didn't hold up any better, fact for fact, than the memory of an unremarkable afternoon. But confidence didn't decline the same way. People's belief that their memory of the attacks was accurate stayed high, long after the actual accuracy had slipped. Their belief in the ordinary memory dropped, appropriately, right along with its accuracy. Only the emotional one kept insisting on itself. The researchers' conclusion, more or less, these memories aren't special because they're accurate. They're special because they feel accurate. Confidence, not consistency. That's the finding in the paper's own title. You can feel exactly how this works if you think about the version of that kitchen conversation you're carrying right now. You'd swear to the tone. You'd swear to the exact words. You'd take a polygraph on it. That certainty feels like proof. It isn't. It's a symptom of how emotionally loaded the memory was going in, not a measurement of how faithfully it's been preserved coming out. I was sure I remembered exactly what she said, word for word. Word for word turned out to be generous. I'd apparently added a sentence somewhere along the way that made me sound more patient than I actually was, and cut one that made her sound less unreasonable than she actually was. Nobody corrected me. There was no one to correct me. The memory had been quietly editing its own transcript for years, and I'd been treating the final draft like a court record. So the loudness was never proof. It was just loudness. Vivid and true are two different claims, and your memory has spent years billing you for both while only actually delivering one. So if the past can be this loud and still be wrong about itself, the useful question stops being, how do you remember it better? It becomes, what do you actually do about the volume? Marcus Aurelius wasn't writing for an audience. Meditations was never meant to be published. It was his own private notebook, written in camp on campaign, in the middle of a war he didn't especially want to be fighting. And in one entry, you can catch him mid-conversation with himself, clearly talking himself down from something. He starts by telling himself not to let his imagination run the whole show, not to sit there assembling every bad thing that's happened or might happen into one crushing pile. Stick with what's actually in front of you, he says. Ask what's genuinely unbearable about it. Then he lands the actual point, the one this whole video has been circling. Past and future have no power over you, only the present, and even that can be minimized. Not the quote people usually put on a mug. That's a different entry, earlier in the book, about not being able to lose what you don't possess. This one's sharper. Less consolation, more instruction. He's not comforting himself. He's correcting himself in real time, mid-thought. And the logic underneath it holds up better than you'd expect from something this old. The event is over, fixed, done being what it was going to be. What isn't fixed, what's still actively happening, is the judgment currently running on top of it. That judgment is present tense. It's happening right now, in whatever room you're standing in while you replay it. The past was never holding the power. The power was always sitting in whatever you're doing with it this exact minute. Which reframes your kitchen conversation completely. It's not that the memory has some kind of grip on you from 4 years back. It can't reach you from 4 years back. Nothing can. What's actually happening is that something in your present keeps reaching backward and picking it up. That's a strange thing to realize about your own mind. Slightly unsettling, honestly. The idea that you've been treating something as a fixed weight from the past when it's closer to a decision you keep quietly remaking today and yesterday. And probably tomorrow, which would just be a nice reframe, a decent philosophical trick, except it turns out to be closer to a literal description of what's happening in your skull than Marcus had any way of knowing. Marcus didn't have an amygdala scan. He had apparently a correct intuition, arrived at with nothing but a notebook and a bad week. Because put his line next to the reconsolidation research from earlier, and they stop being two separate ideas. They're describing the same thing from 2,000 years apart. Past and future have no power over you isn't just a comforting way to talk yourself down. It's close to a literal account of what your hippocampus is doing every time you touch that memory. The past you keep replaying isn't a fixed recording sitting in a vault, waiting on you to check on it. It's being actively reassembled right now, in the present, using whatever you're currently feeling as part of the raw material. Your present mood doesn't just color how you experience remembering it. It gets folded into the memory itself, on the way back into storage. The past has no power of its own. It only ever borrows power from whatever's happening in you today, which means the memory was never the thing holding the volume knob. You were. This whole time. That one still runs a few times a year. I used to think that meant it mattered more than everything else that happened that same week. More than the good stuff. More than the ordinary stuff. More than most of what actually filled my calendar. It just means I keep opening the file. That's the whole explanation. Not that it was the most important thing, just that it's the one I keep retrieving. Feeling bad about the mechanism doesn't change the mechanism. It's just another way of opening the file. What actually matters is what this implies. If retrieval is what keeps a memory loud, reactivating it, letting the present rewrite it in whatever mood you happen to be in that day, then retrieval is not a passive thing happening to you. It's an action, one you're taking on a loop, usually without noticing you're taking it. So if opening the file is what keeps it loud, the next question answers itself before you even finish asking it. What happens if you open a different one on purpose instead? Not let it go. Letting go was never actually a mechanism. It was a hope, dressed up as an instruction, handed to people who had no idea how to execute it. You can't outwill a filing system. Telling yourself to stop caring about the kitchen conversation doesn't touch the part of your brain that keeps opening the file. Willpower isn't a lever that connects to reconsolidation. But you can point the same machinery somewhere else, because the machinery doesn't care what it's asked to retrieve. It just retrieves what you keep handing it. There's a study from 2016 worth knowing about. Researchers had people practice retrieving specific memories, not vague positive thinking, actual retrieval, the same mechanism doing the same job it does with the kitchen memory, just pointed at something else. A week later, the people who'd practiced retrieving good memories were recalling more good memories without being asked to, and their mood held steadier than the people who hadn't. The bias didn't stay in the lab. It followed them home. That's the whole protocol, and it's smaller than you'd expect for something built on this much research. Not think positive. One specific memory, pulled up in real detail, where you were standing, what the air smelled like, who said what, practice the same way you've been unintentionally practicing the kitchen one. The mechanism that's been working against you runs in both directions. It was never loyal to the bad memory. It just goes wherever it's sent, most often. I tried the version where you just tell yourself to let it go. Lasted about 4 hours. What actually worked wasn't telling myself anything. It was giving the same machine a different job. You don't need to win an argument with a memory that's 3 years old. You just need to stop being the one who keeps opening it. Which brings you back to that scene in the kitchen. It's not a weight the past is pressing on you from somewhere behind you. It never was. It's a file. One you've opened enough times that opening it started to feel involuntary, like something being done to you instead of something you were doing. It wasn't holding on. You were reaching for it. That's not comforting exactly. But it is, finally, accurate. And accurate turns out to be the only version of this that was ever going to help.